Lara and I are both joining from the traditional and unceded territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I've lived in Vancouver for the past 7 years or so. Yeah, I'll just give an overview of what our presentation is going to look like today. We are very excited to share some of our learnings from the past couple of years of this program, from the early stages of connecting with the community and building a collective restoration vision, to project implementation and ongoing stewardship. So I'm going to start off with an introduction to the Rivershed Society of BC, which is the organization that we work at and that I work at and that Foodlands Corridor Restoration Program is a part of, as well as an overview of the Fraser Watershed, though I'm sure everybody is familiar with it in some capacity here. And then we have 3 sections of what our presentation will look like. We're starting with section 1 after the introduction, which will be focused on people and place and the importance of recognizing unique relationships to place when we're doing habitat restoration and building a project team with a diverse set of skills. Then we'll focus on habitat restoration methods and break down some of the techniques that we use on our project. And then part 3, we'll talk about continued stewardship and what stewarding a restored habitat can look like moving into the future. And we'll take some time to pause after each section to see if there's any questions in chat. So to any of the participants, if you have a question pop up, I think it's best if you write them in chat as they come up, because it is a bit of a longer presentation. So I think it's easy for those things to get missed when we come around to the end. Yeah, so the Rivershed Society of BC has been around as an organization since 1996. Our vision is the Fraser as a resilient watershed with salmon, people, and economies flourishing in rivershed communities. We are working to achieve this through watershed CPR, which is to connect, protect, and restore the Fraser and its 34 riversheds. And that includes working with community. Foodlands is a part of this effort. The Foodlands Corridor Restoration Program started on the ground work in 2021. We use the term Foodlands in the name of the program to acknowledge a diversity of food harvesting systems, both from a Western farming and from a traditional hunting and gathering perspective. And the goal of Foodlands is to restore and connect adjacent parcels of privately held land to form a natural corridor, or a Foodlands corridor. In addition to Foodlands, Rivershed does a lot of different other things. We organize in-person and on-the-water programs to bring communities together and get out on the water to meaningfully connect to the watershed and to each other. And we are creating a watershed CPR dashboard. This project will create a map of other protection and habitat restoration efforts throughout the watershed to bring more visibility to this work. So the main stem of the Fraser River is over 1,300 kilometers long, and the watershed spreads over an even larger distance when you consider all of the tributaries that connect to it. This means that the Fraser watershed connects to many, many different communities throughout the province. This also means that it has many different names that refer to. Tŝilhqot'in is its name in my traditional language. Stalu is its name in Hunkamina. That's just 2 examples, but the Fraser watershed connects to so many different communities, and it's really fun to learn the different names for it. We know that the Fraser watershed is in trouble. The number of spawning salmon is a good indicator of watershed health. Historically, 50 million sockeye salmon returned annually to the Fraser River. In 2022, despite it being considered a dominant year for sockeye, the reported number was only about 5.5 million. The health of the watershed is under threat from industry, urbanization, and climate change. I have some photos up to show some examples of some of the issues that the watershed is facing. And the photo from the top left is actually of one of Rivershed's canoes out on the water in the lower Fraser. Pretty cool photo captured of the canoe and showing how much industry is adjacent to the river. Yeah, and of course, everybody is familiar with the atmospheric rivers that happened in 2021 and how much that impacted the watershed. So we consider the Fraser Watershed as 6 regions, including the headwaters where the main stem of the Fraser starts, the Tŝilhqot'in, that's where I'm from, the Caribou Tŝilhqot'in, Tonson Shuswap, the Fraser Canyon, and the Lower Fraser. The Fraser Watershed drains 25% of the province. This means that what happens in the Fraser headwaters impacts the Lower Fraser and vice versa. We believe that protection or restoration efforts done without a watershed lens will not have the same level of impact as ones that consider watershed-wide connections. And salmon are a good example of this. They travel hundreds of kilometers throughout the watershed to complete their life cycle. And if that cycle is disrupted, the people, communities, and nature that depend on the salmon are impacted. First part of our presentation. Over to you, Lara.
Thank you. Yeah, so when we talk about ecological restoration, we need to be thinking about and planning for the interconnections that constitute a healthy watershed for all. So ecology and culture are intertwined. And when we shift our thinking towards this, when we examine those interconnections, we're able to find solutions that are innovative, long-lasting, and impactful. And I think this can be affirmed when we look at the legacy of colonialism. You know, lack of protections given or even considered for both ecological and cultural well-being. Today, we're still seeing how those decisions and some mechanisms are impacting our landscapes and waterways and the people who rely on them, and how they can hinder our ability to think outside the box and help us reach viable solutions in a time when we are in multiple crises: climate crisis, health crisis, food crisis, and many, many others. They're all interconnected. So when we're looking at what constitutes a healthy watershed, we need to be thinking about all of these as being interconnected. And you cannot separate the ecological restoration from the cultures and the people and their relationships to the land. Next slide, please. So what does it take to shift our thinking? Hard work. I think we need to embrace the idea of a daily kind of personal and professional work plan where we strive to unlearn the ways of doing that we've been told are the ways that we should be doing things, and relearn by being open and to learn the truths associated with colonialism. This allows us to have an intersectional understanding of problems and helps us see what new paths are possible ahead of us. And it allows for us to have a much more collaborative spirit in order to achieve great things on the ground. This includes finding ways to bring people together who wouldn't ordinarily sit at the same table. So when one starts from this place, that's when meaningful conversation happens and aligned shared values emerge, which can then tie to common goals and objectives and actions. So Foodlands is as much of an approach, a way of being and doing and showing up differently in our spaces of engagement as it is about ecological restoration and cultural reclamation on the ground. And, you're all here and part of Nature Vancouver because of your commitment and passion to learn and take those learnings and turn them into advancing streamside and coastal marine protection and long-term stewardship solutions. This requires whole systems thinking because many of the current issues we are facing today were created by not taking into account those interconnections between all people, the importance of culture and a sense of place for an entire community's well-being, and consideration for all species and components which make up our land and waterways. Emily?
Okay, yeah. So this is the Ashwayan Stotflu, or the Salmon River. This is where Foodlands first started our work in August of 2021. That's when we started on the groundwork, although there was plenty of prep work that came before that. This is located in Langley in the shared territories of the Kwantlen Kitsi, Semiahmoo, and Matsqui nations. Yeah, there is a lot of reasons why this was identified as a priority area for restoration. First, we started identifying multiple different priority areas through having conversations, doing research and going on tours with other local stewardship groups, nature clubs, other environmental NGOs and alliances like the Lower Fraser Fisheries Alliance. Through this, the Ashwayan Staplu was identified as what would be a good area for habitat restoration. We then reached out to the Kwantlen First Nation to determine if it was a priority area for the community, which it was confirmed to be, not only because it has high need for riparian restoration due to impacts from agricultural practice, clearing land throughout the stretch of the corridor, and reed canary grass and other invasive plants being prominent. But it's a priority because it holds great significance to the community. The river was historically a trading route for local nations and is aptly named as the Salmon River because it is a container for multiple different species of salmon, as well as other fish such as the Salish sucker, which is endangered. One notable thing about this river is that it's not very accessible to Kwantlen and other local nations because much of it is on agricultural land reserve and is private property. So even though this is culturally a significant area, because much of it is private property, the nations aren't able to access it for fishing or for other traditional practices. So here's a map of the corridor that we are focusing on. This is just one stretch of the river. This is between Highway 1 and another road. And since 2021, we have completed 7 restoration sites, which is quite a bit to achieve in just 2 years. So the green dots that you see on this map are sites that we have completed, and the blue sites are ones that we have identified as being priority for us to look to restore next. We have also done restoration on 1 crown parcel, and then the rest are private property. For next year, we are coordinating an additional bank stabilization project and a multi-wetland complexing and connectivity project. So we're pretty excited for that coming up. Over to you, Lara.
Thank you. So this is a series of photos to kind of indicate like how does one achieve this scale of work, and it kind of starts by thinking through and forming a fully integrated team that brings a diverse set of skills and knowledge, expertise, and different relationships to place. And of course, that includes the private landholders as well. We need their participation in order to do this work. So building trusting relationships can take time, but when you're able to kind of open up and listen and hear what everyone's concerns are and respect all the voices at the table, it makes it easier to collectively find solutions and forge those relationships that are required to do the work. And often they come with full engagement, participation, and support. Our first landholder reached out to us after we dropped a letter in his mailbox to introduce the Foodlands program, which is one of our main methods of outreach and engagement, is to basically put together a lovely little package and go and drop them into landholders' mailboxes. So when the project team met with him, he reached out and got our letter. And when the project team met with him, he pulled me aside and said, okay, this is all sounding great, you know, but if I commit to this work, do I still get to keep my land? And I was like, okay. I'm like, of course, like, you know, yeah, no, yeah, of course it's still going to be your land, right? And so there was a bit of a fear around that about, you know, opening the doors to us coming in and doing this work. And then also when you're doing riparian restoration work or in-stream restoration work, I think there's a bit of a fear that the province might require you to put that into some kind of an easement or covenant to protect it. Anyway, which is not the case. They'd like you to do that. It's not the case. But anyway, within 3 or 4 months after being involved, after he was being involved and with us and on the land interacting with our team, he started to really see what we were doing and the connections between ecological and cultural restoration. And this had led him to donating another portion of land and shift his language to, you know, yeah, do work, do more work here, do what you think is best, it's yours. And so that was a super fast shift in, do I get to keep my land, to, you know what, this is ours and yours, and I'm fully committed and supportive of whatever it is you want to do. So that shift created, you know, even on a bigger scale, it created a team that then becomes an active champion in the community, which helps the Foodlands program and our project team to connect and engage with other landholders as we move forward and aim to do more work on new parcels and create this larger restored corridor. Very cool.
Yeah, one of our collaborators, you could see the list of our collaborators in the middle of the last slide, and which included some of the logos or the names of some of the organizations or companies that we work with. But when we started this Tŝilhqot'in Corridor, we took a collaborative approach to project coordination with CM Kwantlen, which is the business subsidiary of the Kwantlen First Nation. So this web of connections on this slide demonstrates just one example of what a collaborative approach to project development and implementation might look like. So this might look different for every project depending on, you know, what the community is like or how those dynamics are. But yeah, so here we have relationships going in multiple directions, with various groups having unique relationships in terms of what collaboration and communication really looks like. And in many instances, connections are built between groups that, you know, might not have previously known each other or been familiar with each other or worked directly. And those new relationships are built as we collectively steward the project's sites together over time. So one example of this is Langley Environmental Partner Society, which Rivershed coordinates with to design the project plans and carry out a lot of the hands-on work like planting. LEPS is really valuable for that because they do a lot of that work themselves out in Langley. And then on CM Kwantlen's side, the Kwantlen Land Guardians are a new group that just formed only a couple of years ago. And what Langley Environmental Partner Society and the Kwantlen Land Guardians are doing is this year in 2023, they took a collaborative approach to the maintenance of the project sites, working together to make this happen, building capacity together, learning from each other. And yeah, those relationships can really be meaningful, and it creates more possibilities beyond just this one project. Over to you, Lara.
Thanks. Yeah, and this is just a slide showing kind of a handful of the team that it takes to come together to provide everything from funding. There's landholders in here, so the land to do the work, materials and labor. We get a lot of in-kind support as well. We have Western science experts and consultants, environmental consultants, and we have traditional ecological knowledge expertise here too, through language speakers and knowledge holders, as well as cultural ambassadors that provide song and cultural ceremony at various stages throughout the project. So you can see it's quite a big team of support that it takes to do this kind of work. But all these people, that's what Foodlands does. It brings together all of these people into the same space and strive towards common goals. And I think that's the end of our first bit.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we're just going to take a pause here to see if anybody has any hot questions that, that can't wait until the end of the presentation. So feel free to pop those into chat. If not, that's okay. And, we'll have time for questions later on as well.
So just so you know, there's nothing in chat right now.
Okay. All right, thanks. I can't see chat, so thanks for letting me know. All right, I think we'll just move on from here. All right, part 2, we're going to talk about some of the restoration methods that we've incorporated in this project. Many of those built through our collaborations in designing a project plan. So through Foodlands, we use a two-eyed seeing approach to habitat restoration, combining traditional knowledge and Western science to inform the restoration work that we do. We recognize that Foodlands and all habitat restoration is just as much about cultural reclamation as it is about ecological restoration, and the two are intertwined and interconnected. We have targeted a diversity of plants and wildlife in the habitat restoration that we do in the Tŝilhqot'in Corridor. This also means not just doing what is considered to be most convenient or necessarily cost-effective or fits a common template for restoration, but focusing on biodiversity and honoring place-based cultural values. The result of this is a rich restored habitat for not only non-humans, but also for people. So we've incorporated approximately 20 different species of trees and shrubs in the work that we do. This slide just has 4 examples of what those are. One really cool example is the Ķʻot'in elf, or the Pacific crabapple. This is a traditional food plant that one folks from Kwantlen who we've been working with was really excited that we were incorporating, because it's something that you don't see as abundantly throughout the Lower Fraser area as much anymore. And this is a plant that we wouldn't have necessarily thought to include in our restoration work if it hadn't have been for the traditional knowledge holders that we consulted with, and that shared information about what plants historically or currently are found throughout the area and throughout watersheds like the Salmon River. Through our work, we also use and center language. So we center the Halkamilam and Hunkaminam names for places, plants, and animals to really honor that traditional knowledge and continue to recognize the traditional territories that we are doing work on, and what the real meaning of this work is. I think it was mentioned in the beginning of this meeting that Indigenous people have been stewarding these lands for thousands and thousands of years, since time immemorial, and this habitat restoration work is certainly not the start of land stewardship. Yeah. I will pass it over to you, Lara.
Thanks, Emily. So this was the landholder, the first landholder that reached out to us. This was his property, and he reached out to us because the before shot here, he had a rapidly eroding bank. He has a grazing pasture. He has goats and pigs and various things and livestock, and he had concerns that yeah, he was losing quite a bit of land year after year. So so what we ended up doing is working with him and our Foodlands team, and co-created a restoration plan. So it meant that obviously we were going to meet his goal of not losing any more grazing pasture, but in addition to that, what we would end up doing is restoring vital fish habitat, which includes food sources, resting places, and for aquatic species, refuge from predators, reducing sediment and turbidity in the water by reducing velocity during high flow periods, choking out the invasive reed canary grass, which is really the major cause of all of this erosion and bank instability in the first place, improve thermal regulation. So the entire plan was achieved by using soft engineering techniques and then planting traditional and biodiverse food and medicine species. So this is what it looks like, that photo, that after photo. This is what it looks like when the technique is kind of broken apart. So what we start off doing is excavating, agreeing on how much land we were going to cut into his pasture to do. And we would excavate and slope the bank back to 3-to-1 slope. We drove untreated pine posts, kind of like a little pegboard, into the area that needed to be stabilized, brought in large woody debris and cobble and boulders, and that creates a whole bunch of different habitat opportunities. Plus, the big logs act as bumpers to logs during high flow periods that come careening down the river. And then we interweave cedar and branches, and we cable all of it down so that it doesn't move. And then we come in and we plant live willow stakes in between, and red osier dogwood, and plant robust riparian buffer to create all those nice things that we need, like thermal regulation and food sources and stuff that I mentioned before. So yeah, so none of this is, there was no riprap here. Everything that was placed with intention to create habitat and to solve the problem of the erosion continuing. And so all these little crevices that we created using interwoven branches and things, actually in high flow periods. So we finished this work at the end of November 2021, and we had, I don't know what, 3 atmospheric river events. The entire floodplain was under 6 feet of water. And then when the waters receded, we went back with the team and had a look. And in fact, everything had held up. And it was remarkable to see that the redeposition of sediment to build the bank back was already filling into all these crevices. So it's an amazing technique, and kind of it's all natural materials. So the plan, so we did that work for him, but as we were kind of working through it, he said he really loved seeing what we did and had some bigger ideas about how he would create a new grazing pasture for himself, which meant that there was another section of land that he said that we could just have and do what we wanted. So we were pretty excited about it because This was an opportunity for us to create off-channel wetted habitat for overwintering coho and other species at risk. So here what we did was we excavated finger-like channels in the floodplain, with one of them connecting to the main stem of the river. We placed large woody debris again and rocks, and installed various components to create complex habitats. And so during the high flow periods, these channels flood. Coho and other fish come in, spend the winter there resting and feeding. We learned that coho are the only species of salmon that actually overwinter in fresh water. And then we fenced it off because, of course, he has livestock, and goats love anything green. So again, this work is happening. Neighbors, peer over their fences. They see the buzz happening around. They go check their mailboxes. They see that they have the same letter in theirs. And so 2 doors down, while we were working on this project, a couple had just purchased the property, and they're nature photographers and conservationists, and they've responded to that letter and said, hey, can you come and take a look at our property? We have an amazing marsh, but we think it's problematic and it's not functioning right. And so sure enough, we did a marsh restoration project here and reconnected the channel to the main stem river again, so that there's safe fish passage back and forth. So all 3 of these projects were collectively designed, consented to, permitted for, and constructed within 1 year from start to finish. The next slide, Emily. And then this is just a photo of this Kelly Yates. He's a Kwantlen elder who has been with us from the beginning of the project. And he went out and harvested something like 4,000 live willow stakes, 2 species of willows, and red osier dogwood, and 100 live cottonwood poles. And we propagated these. So we put them in soil beds and let them root. And then we came back in the fall, and they were watered and taken care of. And then we came back in the fall and planted them. And so many species can be harvested right from your backyard if you had them and they were mature enough. Willow, cottonwood, hardhack, black twinberry, red osier dogwood are all great plants, and they have many benefits, ranging from quick rooting systems to help stabilize banks, to providing food sources for so many species. They also grow really quickly to create, you can see that photo on the right, that was I think 2 seasons of growth. We went from 1 meter tall to close to 3-4 meters. And so they create quick shade canopy, and that's really great to smother reed canary grass, because that's the one thing it loves is sunshine. So
yeah, I'll add that the photo on the right here was taken from the same site in the previous slide, and that's that connection channel between the marsh and the river didn't look very vegetated around it because it was taken right after we did the construction work. It's a little bit harder to actually see the channel when you have these huge willows in the picture, and same with the off-channel habitats in the pasture. You can't quite see all the channels because we have this lovely vegetation growing up tall, and that's part of what we want, though. We want the cover to provide habitat and to moderate water temperatures. It's pretty exciting to see such a big change in 2 years, and the height of how much these willows have grown.
And beaver caging. So beaver, there's quite a few dams along the Tŝilhqot'in Nation, and so all of our trees go into caging, and they get staked, and so that they stay in place during high flow periods. The one thing that we learned that beaver don't like to eat are red twig dogwoods, the red osier dogwoods. So we're really lucky that we often plant a lot of that near the river edge, where they like to come and go, and then we can avoid having to do a lot more work doing the caging. And then we also do livestock exclusion fencing. So you can see that photo on the left, that's me with our cottonwood poles. And I mean, they are trying every possible way to get to vegetation, food source. And then I think that's the end of that section.
Yeah, funny story from our very first week of planting. We were bringing down a bunch of the plants in wheelbarrows, and the goats were just chasing us down. We had to have one person dedicated to sort of being a bodyguard and shooing away the goats so that they wouldn't eat all of the shrubs and trees before we managed to get them down there. It was pretty funny. They were cute, but I love them. But at that point, I was like, go away, you guys. So that's the end of section 2. I'll give it a moment for any questions arising about the habitat restoration methods. Not sure if there's any in chat.
There isn't any in chat, but I have jotted down a couple things.
Okay.
So I'm curious about I know something about reed canary grass, and I'm just interested because you said that it causes slope instability. Can you explain that? How does that? I mean, I know it's an invasive species, it's not native and everything, but how does it cause slope instability?
So reed canary grass is really prevalent in a lot of areas that have been cleared. It just comes in quick and sort of takes over the area. So it's hard for native species to establish if you're not, bringing them in and actually planting them. But the reason they cause instability in the riverbanks is because they have a really shallow root system. So I have other photos that better show it, but essentially where, other shrubs or trees might have really deep root systems to hold that bank together. Reed canary grass is very shallow. I think it's like, I don't know how deep they can go to a maximum, but it doesn't look very, very long. And what you'll see actually along the banks of the Tŝilhqot'in Nation is overhanging banks, and you'll see where it gives a good view, and you can see where the roots of the reed canary grass end, and often there will be an overhanging bank and the grass is falling in and the substrate is falling in and slowly eroding from the bank. Lara, do you have anything else to add there?
No, I don't. I mean, that's exactly it. Because there isn't a mix of different rooting systems within that riparian area, and it's solely just shallow roots, and the backetting and the turbulence from the high flow periods in the rivers and things coming downstream. There's a lot of debris that comes downstream during storms. It just knocks away the land. It undercuts it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So then I actually wrote down how did you get rid of it, but of course you can shade it out. So did you just plant the stakes just like amongst the reed canary grass, or did you dig it out first?
Yeah, on the bank project we did, we excavated back. So from that vertical face, we went back about I don't know how far, maybe 20 feet. On that slope, so that actually removed any of the reed canary grass that might have been growing there. In the fish channel, in the off channel area, what we ended up doing was with the excavated portions that we dug out, we turned it upside down and created mounds where we put logs and stumps to create more complex habitat. There's still a lot of, like, in the areas where the willows and the cottonwoods are starting to take off, like the reed canary grass is much shorter. Like, it's super effective, but our maintenance team needs to come in there, and the best way to kind of keep it low and keep it down is stomping on it. So But as the plants grow and we put fast growing species in, it will eventually crowd it out. Like you can look across the river and see a stand of conifers and other large mature forests, mixed forest types, and there's no reed canary grass over there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it'll take time and time for the newly planted trees to grow, and time for us to continue our maintenance to make sure they can grow. The first year that we did planting, though, the first summer, the reed canary grass actually did have its own role in a way, because it was a very hot summer, and of course, that can kill plants that are newly established. So the reed canary grass in the first year was kind of useful because it was taller than some of the shrubs. It kind of kept them cool and shaded. And now that they're a little bit stronger, have better root systems, that's not as much of a concern. But that's one thing we noticed when we went in to do some of our monitoring, was that the shrubs were actually doing kind of well underneath the reed canary grass. So
Okay.
it was kind of interesting. I think invasive species are kind of painted as evil, but sometimes they can play their own role.
Yeah, definitely. Might as well take advantage of them if they're there, eh?
Yeah. And that was so we had 2 or 3 atmospheric river events, and then we had the heat dome summer.
Right.
And so these restoration projects really stood the test of many things. And they're succeeding. It's very exciting for us. So anyway, that was a great question, because it leads us into the part 3, the continued stewardship part.
Yeah. So well, as we talked about, in maintaining reed canary grass and monitoring our effects, it really is important to focus on building lasting relationships to plays in the work that we do or other groups do in habitat restoration. So it's not just doing the work and saying that's good and moving on. It needs continued maintenance and monitoring. So this involves having a diverse project team that can make this possible by building capacity and longevity of doing the work on the land. Also, allows for ease of transfer of knowledge when the project is carried out by many different individuals. So one way that we do continued stewardship is through effectiveness monitoring. This is required for any of the projects that we do in-stream work on. So the bank stabilization project, the creation of the off-channel habitats, and the marsh restoration. And through this, we can evaluate the effectiveness of the work that we do. So we're required to do this monitoring over a 5-year span. This allows us to see what is working, learn from what isn't working, and create recommendations to further improve our efforts on any specific project site. So we come in, implant new trees or, try new techniques to further improve the restored habitats. This is also, a really great learning opportunity for ourselves and our collaborators or any others that, for example, we present our project to, because everybody is able to learn from the techniques that we use. And it's really rewarding to see the impacts of our work with our own eyes. So this photo of the coho salmon, Tŝilhqot'in, we are finding coho salmon consistently in the off-channel and marsh habitats that we've restored, which is really, really cool to do. So we set minnow traps and, count and figure out what species. There's many other species that we find in the aquatic habitats as well. And we can learn a lot from that, like seeing how abundant the species are and how much diversity there is.
And one thing I'll add to the effectiveness monitoring comments is that so this is Fisheries and Oceans require us to do reporting once a year. So we do two visits a year, and then our team has to prepare this document. And so one of the ways that we bring the cultural component back into kind of the regulatory process is that all of our species and place names are listed in Hunkaminam and Hokamalam dialects, and they get centered in all of our documents. So all of our consultants ensure that that the names of these species, because this is the nation's territories that we are doing this work on, actually are the ones that it's not just English and scientific names of species. In fact, we dropped the scientific species names, and we really just do the Hokamalam dialects and the English names. And so this is a way that language is a very powerful tool to make visible the multiple cultures and the traditional peoples of these lands. So, sorry, I might just need to add that bit.
No worries. Yeah, I already touched on it a bit, but Langley Environmental Partner Society and the Kwantlen Land Guardians are collaborating, have been collaborating on the maintenance of the project sites over the past year. The reason for this is because the Kwantlen Land Guardians are a fairly new group and are really keen to learn and build capacity for their team. So a collaborative approach was really perfect and allows for a lot of mentorship and transfer of knowledge, and just really focusing on getting the Kwantlen Land Guardians, getting the community out on their traditional territories, and carrying out this land stewardship, which often isn't made possible because of the barriers of, private land ownership. So that has been a really cool process. Yeah, and then we also do a lot of different types of monitoring at our project sites. One of that is learning about and doing surveys for species at risk and other species of significance to local communities. We did wildlife surveys and habitat suitability assessments for 4 species at risk. I have 3 up here because one of them was the western screech owl, and considering how small the corridor is, it just isn't, the most suitable for the owls. They need a very large area of connected habitat for each breeding pair. Not to say it's not a possibility in the future. But we also focus on the Pacific water shrew, the little brown myotis, a species of bat, and the Oregon forest snail. And the little brown myotis was actually confirmed to be within the corridor through the use of audio recording units, as well as a bunch of other species of bats. So by doing this monitoring and these habitat suitability assessments, we're able to learn about what species are in the area and how we can target them in our restoration efforts to make these habitats more suitable for these species and support their recovery. So this looks like including large woody debris in all of our aquatic habitat restoration for the Pacific water shrew, because they need cover through corridors that they're hunting and migrating through. Installing bat boxes, maternity boxes for the little brown myotis, and restoring foraging habitat for them. And for the Oregon forest snail, their occurrences are often associated with the presence of big leaf maple and stinging nettle. So after learning this, just this past October, we brought a bunch of big leaf maple in to plant at 2 of our project sites. Lara?
Thank you. Yeah, so these are, so when we did those species at risk surveys, we asked our biology team if they would superimpose all of the species at risk mapping onto one. And what this does is it generates kind of hotspots, or, you know, the highlighted areas in the corridor that now inform us which ones have strong suitability and compatibility for habitat restoration efforts. So this is a really great way to guide us and narrow us in on potential landholders in those parcels, to drop more letters and to ring their doorbells. Yeah, so this is a really great way to, and it also indicates that, you know, species aren't bound by colonial boundaries. You know, so our corridor in our minds it goes beyond that original map. This is just linking adjacent to the stream, but when we look at creating habitat, its range, the corridor range is much broader as well. So
yeah, and then through our work, we also combine a lot of different ways of observing. Not sure if anybody here is familiar with the Birds Canada Marsh Monitoring Program. I noticed a typo there. Oh, shoot. Okay, there we go. Marsh Monitoring Program. But it is a volunteer-led program that focuses on monitoring for bird and amphibian species in marshes. So each year we get out, we often have volunteers to get out on the project sites to monitor for what types of birds and amphibians that we can observe in the restored habitats, as well as on one township of Langley parcel that we haven't done restoration on yet. And there can be a lot of learnings from this. We also take note of any observations made from landholders, maintenance crews, and other folks that are on or interacting with the project sites. So for example, my coworker Mickey noted that the belted kingfisher has been at the project sites a couple of times, and that's really cool to learn because it might not have otherwise been captured if, you know, she hadn't have shared that. We also facilitate access to the project sites for water quality testing or other research efforts that are carried out by other organizations or by universities. That's a project that we are looking to explore. There's a project we're looking to explore with UBC, for example. And we're looking to explore opportunities for eDNA testing. And this is really cool because this all allows us to have a baseline of data to work from and learn from and monitor what the changes in the corridor over time. And we can see what different birds show up. So I know that perhaps there are some birders in this call right now. I heard that, you know, there's a field trip being organized for a birding walk or workshop. So you know, we're always looking for volunteers to help us out with the marsh monitoring. So send me an email if you're interested. And yeah, I think that's the end of our presentation. We can open up for any more questions, but you're always welcome. If any questions or ideas come up after this call, you can email Lara or me. Our emails are at the top of this slide.
I just have to jump in and say, congratulations on such a beautiful collaboration and restored sites. It's fantastic what you're doing.